Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore something most people overlook. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone talks over you, and no matter what you say, it feels like your words don't carry weight? You sit there thinking, why aren't they taking me seriously? That's the first hook tonight, because I want you to realize that respect isn't about shouting louder or demanding attention. It's about carrying yourself in such a way that people have no choice but to listen. The second, imagine yourself in a heated meeting, or maybe a family argument. Voices are rising, tension is thick in the air, and everyone seems locked in a battle for dominance. And then it's your turn to speak. You don't raise your voice, you don't slam your hand on the table. Instead, you say just one line, calmly, clearly, and the room falls silent. People lean in, because in that moment, they realize you're not here to fight, you're here to command. And here too, may be the most powerful of all. Picture walking away from a conversation, not feeling drained, not replaying every word in your head, but instead feeling lighter, stronger, dignified. That's what happens when you know exactly what to say, not from anger, not from ego, but from clarity. Tonight, I'm going to share with you 5 phrases that command respect without shouting. 5 simple sentences that, when spoken with calm conviction, can change how people see you and, more importantly, how you see yourself. So, before we begin, take a moment, settle in, let your mind open to what's possible. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Phrase 1. I understand your point, but I disagree. Have you ever noticed how the loudest voice in the room often gets the most attention but not the most respect? Have you ever been in a conversation where someone keeps pushing their opinion, and deep down you know they're wrong, but you don't want to start a fight? And have you ever wished you had the perfect sentence? The kind of calm, unshakable phrase that would stop everyone in their tracks, not because you raised your voice, but because you raised the level of the dialogue. That's exactly what we're diving into tonight. Respect is not commanded by volume. Respect is commanded by presence, by clarity, by the subtle but immovable strength of your words. The first phrase we'll master together is deceptively simple, but when spoken with serenity, it has the power to shift the energy of a conversation entirely. The phrase is, I understand your point, but I disagree. Now let's slow down and really sit with that for a moment. Think of the weight behind those words. You're acknowledging the other person. You're showing that you've listened, that you've considered what they've said. But at the same time, you're holding your ground. You're saying, I see you, I hear you, but I am not swayed. This is pure Stoicism in action. Epictetus taught us that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. And here, judgment is exactly what this phrase protects. It's the declaration that your judgment belongs to you, and you will not surrender it to noise, pressure, or ego. Imagine this, you're in a meeting at work. Someone proposes an idea that you know will derail the project. Maybe it's flashy, maybe it sounds good on the surface, but you can see the cracks in the foundation. Others in the room are nodding along because they don't want to be the negative one. But you, armed with stoic calm, wait your turn. And when the spotlight comes to you, you don't attack. You don't roll your eyes or sigh dramatically. You simply say, I understand your point, but I disagree. What happens next? Silence. Not the awkward silence of conflict, but the respectful silence of recognition. Everyone now knows you are not a follower of noise, but a thinker of substance. You've established a boundary. You are willing to listen, but you are not willing to betray your own clarity. The beauty of this phrase is its balance. It does two things simultaneously. First, it honors the dignity of the other person. It shows them you are not dismissing them out of hand, that you value dialogue, that you are not ruled by arrogance. Second, it reinforces your independence. You are not a mirror that simply reflects back what others say. You are a pillar, solid, rooted, thoughtful. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his Meditations, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." What he meant was, this truth is not a popularity contest. Just because others nod along does not mean they are right. The Stoic path is not about joining the crowd, but about standing firm in wisdom, even if that means standing alone. And this phrase is your shield in that moment. But let's look deeper. Why does this phrase carry so much power? Because it separates respect from agreement. Most people think that disagreeing is automatically disrespectful. They fear conflict so much that they either lash out defensively or retreat into silence. Both extremes are weaknesses. Shouting burns bridges. Silence builds resentment. But this phrase, this simple line, charts the middle course. It shows that disagreement can exist without hostility. It teaches others that you can stand firm without being rude. Now, let's pull this into real life, beyond the boardroom. Imagine a family argument. A brother, a parent, a partner insisting on a decision you know isn't right for you. Emotions are running high, voices rising. It's so easy to get caught in the storm, to either fight back with the same energy or to give in just to end the tension. But Stoicism calls us to be the calm within the storm, to be the lighthouse, not the crashing wave. And so you take a breath, steady your voice, and you say, "I understand your point, but I disagree." That's it. No shouting, no guilt tripping, no over-explaining, just clarity. And you'll notice something fascinating. People often soften when they hear it. Because you've acknowledged them, their defenses lower. And because you've stood your ground, their respect rises. Now, some may push back. They may say, "But what if they keep arguing?" And here's where Stoic wisdom really shines. You are not responsible for convincing them. You are responsible only for maintaining your own reason, your own character. Epictetus reminded us, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about things." If they cling to their opinion, that is theirs to wrestle with. Yours is to maintain your serenity by saying, "I understand your point, but I disagree." You've done your part. You've drawn your line. And sometimes, the most powerful persuasion is not to persuade at all, but simply to demonstrate that persuasion is unnecessary. This phrase also teaches you something essential about yourself, that your worth is not measured by agreement. Too often, we think we need validation, that people must nod, must applaud, must echo our views for us to feel secure. But Stoicism calls us to a higher standard. Your clarity is enough. Your judgment, if reasoned and rooted in virtue, stands on its own. Whether or not others align with it is irrelevant. Let me share a modern parallel. Think of someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Supreme Court Justice. time and again. She found herself in the minority opinion, outnumbered by louder voices. But she didn't shout. She didn't cave. She wrote dissents with clarity and dignity, statements that began with, "I respectfully dissent." That's another way of saying, "I understand your point, but I disagree." And those dissents, once considered quiet footnotes, later became the foundation for future justice. Respect does not always arrive immediately. Sometimes it echoes through time. So how do you practice this in your own life? First, train your tone. It's not just the words, it's how you say them. Calm, steady, unhurried. Think of Marcus Aurelius writing late at night, pen scratching against parchment, reflecting not with haste but with patience. Speak like that. Second, let your body language match your words. Don't point fingers, don't lean aggressively. Sit upright, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. Your calm posture tells the story before your words even arrive. Third, release the need for outcome. When you say this phrase, don't cling to winning the debate. Your goal is not to conquer, but to clarify. The moment you release the outcome, you are free. And in that freedom, others will sense your strength. Remember, Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering response. This phrase is mastery distilled. You're not denying the other person's humanity. You're not fueling their fire. You're simply saying, "I see you, I hear you, and yet, I stand where I stand." That's why this phrase commands respect without shouting, because respect, at its core, is not about domination, it's about character. And when people witness your character calm, firm, unbending in virtue, they cannot help but respect it. So the next time you find yourself in the heat of a meeting or at the center of an argument, remember this phrase. Let it rise within you like a shield, gentle but unbreakable. Say it slowly, say it firmly. I understand your point, but I disagree. And then let the silence do the work. In that silence, you'll notice something remarkable. The air shifts, the tension fades, and suddenly, you're no longer the one reacting, you're the one setting the terms. That is the true Stoic power. Not the loudest voice in the room, but the calmest. Not the one who forces respect, but the one who inspires it. And that's just the first of the 5. This phrase alone can transform the way people see you. But the journey doesn't stop here, because there are more tools, more shields, more arrows of wisdom waiting, each one designed to help you command respect in a world where so many waste their energy shouting. Phrase 2, I don't find that appropriate. Have you ever been in a moment where someone crossed a line and you froze? Maybe it was a joke that wasn't funny. Maybe it was a comment that cut deeper than it should have. Maybe it was subtle, like an eye roll, a dismissive tone, or an unnecessary jab in front of others. And in that split second, you had a choice: laugh along, stay silent, or speak up. Most of us hesitate. We don't want to create tension. We don't want to be seen as uptight. So we swallow the discomfort, smile awkwardly, and let the disrespect pass. But here's the truth: every time you allow disrespect to go unchecked, you send a silent message that you are willing to be treated that way again. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Seneca wrote, "He who respects himself will be respected by others." Respect begins not with what others say to you, but with what you accept from them. And this is where our second phrase comes in. The phrase that sets the boundary without drama. The phrase that communicates dignity without anger. The phrase is this: I don't find that appropriate. Now, notice the elegance of those words. You're not yelling. You're not insulting. You're not throwing blame. You are simply stating a fact about your standards. You are saying, that may work for others, but not with me. This is a line I will not allow you to cross. It's a sentence that is short, direct, and impossible to argue with. Because how can someone debate what you find appropriate? Picture this scene. You're in a group of colleagues, and someone makes a crude joke at your expense. The group chuckles nervously, waiting to see how you'll respond. Do you laugh along to keep the peace, or do you retreat into silence, letting the joke hang in the air? Both options leave a dent in your dignity, but instead, imagine you hold your composure, look the person in the eye, and calmly say, I don't find that appropriate. What happens in that moment? The laughter dies instantly. The air shifts. Suddenly, the person who thought they were clever is forced to confront the weight of their words. And you, without raising your voice, have established your boundary. Not with aggression, but with calm authority. The power of this phrase lies in its refusal to engage in the other person's game. Disrespect thrives on reaction. The person who mocks you expects either submission or retaliation. Submission fuels their arrogance. Retaliation fuels their drama, but calm dismissal starves them of both. By saying, I don't find that appropriate, you remove their power. You show them that their attempt to belittle you has not landed. And more than that, you demonstrate to everyone watching that you hold yourself to a higher standard. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Think about that. When someone disrespects you, the temptation is to mirror their behavior, to snap back, to sting them with your own sharp words. But when you mirror disrespect, you become what you despise. The Stoic way is different. The Stoic way is to elevate, to show by your conduct that you will not descend to the level of the insult. This phrase is the embodiment of that principle. Let's take another scenario, something more personal. Imagine you're with a friend, someone you've trusted for years. In the middle of a conversation, they say something that crosses a boundary. Maybe it's about your life choices, your family, or a struggle you've confided in them. The words sting, and for a moment, your chest tightens with the urge to fire back. But instead, you pause, breathe, and say, I don't find that appropriate. That one sentence is enough. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to debate why, because your worth is not up for negotiation. You've set the line, and you've said it without apology. True friends will feel the weight of those words and recalibrate. Those who don't, well, their reaction tells you everything you need to know about the value they place on your dignity. Now let's step back and see why this matters so much. Because we live in a culture where people often mistake tolerance for virtue. We're told to be easygoing, to not make a fuss, to let it slide. And yes, there are battles not worth fighting, but when it comes to your dignity, your boundaries, your self-respect, silence is not peace. Silence is surrender. And a life of constant surrender leads to quiet resentment, the slow erosion of your soul. The Stoics would never encourage that. They would tell you that peace does not come from avoiding conflict at all costs. Peace comes from living in harmony with your values. And sometimes, that harmony requires you to stand firm, to say calmly but clearly, "I don't find that appropriate." Think of it this way: your words are like a shield. A shield doesn't attack. It doesn't shout. It simply blocks what should not pass. And this phrase is exactly that, a shield against disrespect. Used wisely, it protects your inner peace without inviting chaos. Now, let's talk about tone, because the tone is everything here. If you say this phrase with anger, it loses its power. If you snap, if you sneer, you've allowed the other person to pull you off center. But when you say it with composure, with a steady voice and calm eyes, it becomes undeniable. People may not like it, but they cannot dismiss it. Think of a judge in a courtroom. They don't shout to maintain order. They simply speak, and order follows. Why? Because their authority is rooted in clarity and calmness. When you say, "I don't find that appropriate," you are stepping into that same space of quiet authority. Let me give you a modern example. Think of Michelle Obama. When confronted with disrespect, she became famous for her phrase, "When they go low, we go high." That's another form of this Stoic wisdom. She didn't engage in mudslinging. She didn't allow disrespect to define her conduct. Instead, she set the boundary with dignity, and that dignity commanded respect worldwide. Now, here's the practice I want you to try. The next time someone says something that feels off, notice your first impulse. It might be to laugh it off, to avoid awkwardness. It might be to snap back, to defend yourself. Instead, breathe, pause, and then, with calm certainty, say, "I don't find that appropriate." Don't explain. Don't justify. Just let the words sit. At first, it may feel uncomfortable because you're breaking the script. People expect compliance or escalation, not calm boundaries. But give it time. You'll notice the air shift. You'll notice people think twice before crossing that line again. And slowly, you'll begin to see the respect grow around you, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Seneca taught, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. And here's the hidden gift of this phrase. It not only protects your boundaries, it teaches others. It teaches them what respect looks like. It teaches them that you will not participate in behavior that diminishes dignity. And in doing so, you create an environment where respect becomes the norm, not the exception. Let's return to that original question. How do you respond when someone crosses the line? You don't explode. You don't retreat. You stand firm, with clarity, with calm, with dignity. And you say, "I don't find that appropriate." This is not just a phrase. It is a posture, a way of being. It is the declaration that you will not compromise your self-respect for the comfort of others. And in a world that constantly tests our boundaries, that is a rare and powerful strength. So carry this phrase with you. Use it wisely, and notice how it transforms not only the way others treat you, but the way you see yourself. Because when you respect yourself enough to draw the line, others will respect you enough to honor it. Phrase 3. Let's talk when we can do so respectfully. There's a moment we've all faced a conversation that suddenly turns into a storm. Voices rise, tempers flare, words sharpen like knives. You feel the heat rising in your chest, the urge to fire back, to defend yourself, to prove your point. But something deep down whispers, if I lose my calm, I lose my power. Here is where most people stumble. They get pulled into the current of the other person's anger. They match the tone, the volume, the hostility. And before they know it, they're drowning in a sea of words that accomplish nothing but hurt. But you are learning to live differently. You are learning the Stoic way. And the Stoic way is not to fight fire with fire, but to rise above the flames altogether. That's where our third phrase enters like a lighthouse in the storm. Let's talk when we can do so respectfully. Let those words settle for a moment. This phrase does something extraordinary. It interrupts the spiral of conflict. It draws a line without raising a weapon. It tells the other person this conversation is not over, but it will only continue on terms that honor dignity and respect. Now, imagine yourself in that heated exchange. Someone is talking over you, cutting you off, raising their voice. You could match their volume. You could shout back. But picture yourself pausing, breathing, and then calmly saying, "Let's talk," when we can do so respectfully. Instantly, the energy changes. The other person is forced to confront their own behavior. You have not given them the satisfaction of a shouting match, nor have you allowed them to steamroll you into silence. Instead, you've reclaimed control not just of the conversation, but of yourself. Epictetus taught, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. This phrase is that teaching made flesh. You can't control whether someone is aggressive, dismissive, or disrespectful, but you can control whether you allow the conversation to continue on those terms. And by stepping back, you transform the entire dynamic. Let's break down why this phrase works so powerfully. First, it removes you from the battlefield. Anger thrives on engagement. When two voices clash, each escalation fuels the next. But by refusing to engage in that cycle, you starve the fire of oxygen. Conflict loses its fuel. Second, it reframes the rules. You're not saying, "I don't want to talk." You're saying, "I do want to talk, but only in a way that respects us both." This shifts the responsibility back onto the other person. If they want the dialogue to continue, they must rise to a higher standard. Third, it communicates mastery. Most people confuse volume with strength, but true strength is quiet control, the ability to remain steady when others lose their footing. When you say, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully," you demonstrate a kind of authority that doesn't need noise. It is the authority of composure. Now, let's ground this in real life. Picture a couple in an argument. One is shouting, the other trying desperately to defend themselves. The voices get louder, the words sharper. Suddenly, one partner pauses, looks the other in the eyes, and says, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully." Then they step back. What happens? The momentum of the fight collapses. The storm runs out of wind. That one sentence can break a destructive cycle that might otherwise spiral into regret. Or imagine a workplace conflict. A colleague, frustrated, raises their voice in a meeting. all eyes turn toward you. You could match their tone, risking an explosion in front of everyone. Or you could shrink, hoping it ends quickly. But instead, you stay calm and say, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully." In that instant, you model professionalism. You set the standard not only for yourself, but for the entire room. And people remember that. They respect it. This is why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer." When someone disrespects you, the temptation is to respond in kind, but that only makes you a mirror of their weakness. The Stoic path is not to reflect their chaos, but to radiate your calm. Now, here's something important. This phrase isn't about running away. It's about stepping aside until the ground is steady. Some people hear it and think, "But doesn't that mean I'm avoiding the conversation?" No, it means you are choosing the terms. You are saying, "I will engage," but only when it is worthwhile, when it is grounded in respect. That is not avoidance, that is wisdom. Think about the wisdom of a general. No wise general chooses to fight every battle, on every field, under every condition. They choose their ground carefully. They wait for the moment when their position is strongest. That's what you're doing here. You're choosing the battlefield of respect and refusing to fight anywhere else. Let's talk about tone again, because tone is everything. If you say this phrase with sarcasm or contempt, it loses its power. If you roll your eyes or smirk, you're still playing the game of ego. But when you say it with sincerity, calm, and gravity, it becomes unassailable. It's like lowering a drawbridge on your terms. The conversation can continue, but only with dignity. Here's a practical exercise. The next time someone raises their voice at you, don't immediately respond. Pause, take a single breath, feel your feet on the ground, as if you're rooting yourself in the present. Then, with steady voice and calm eyes, say, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully," and then stop. Do not explain. Do not justify. Just let the silence work. You'll be surprised by what happens. Sometimes, the other person will immediately quiet down, realizing their behavior is being reflected back to them. Other times, they may walk away in frustration. Either way, you've preserved your dignity and protected your peace. And you've taught them, whether they admit it or not, that you are not someone who engages in conversations without respect. Think about leaders we admire. Nelson Mandela, for instance, spent 27 years in prison, often faced with hostility and disrespect, but he never allowed his captors' hatred to dictate his conduct. When he finally emerged, he spoke not with bitterness, but with dignity. He showed the world that true strength is measured not in retaliation, but in restraint. Saying, "Let's talk when we can do so respectfully," is a way of practicing that same strength in our daily lives. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is a slave to his passions." And here's the truth: when you argue with someone who has lost control, you risk becoming enslaved to their emotions. But when you step back, when you insist on respect, you remain free. You remain the master of yourself. And let's not overlook what this phrase does for you internally. Every time you use it, you train yourself to pause before reacting. You strengthen the muscle of self-control. You remind yourself that your peace is more valuable than winning a shouting match. And slowly, conversation by conversation, You build an unshakable fortress within yourself, a fortress of calm, dignity, and respect. So let's recap. When a conversation turns toxic, you don't have to choose between silence and shouting. There is a third way, the Stoic way. You pause, you breathe, and you say, "Let's talk," when we can do so respectfully. This phrase is not just a tool for commanding respect from others. It is a declaration of respect for yourself. It tells the world that your peace is not negotiable, that your dignity is not for sale, and that your voice will be heard, but only in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Use it wisely, use it calmly, and watch how the world begins to meet you at the level of respect you demand. Phrase 4. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. There is a quiet strength in knowing when to walk away, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Some conversations are not bridges, they are traps. They are designed not to find truth, but to provoke, to exhaust, to drain your energy. And one of the greatest lessons the Stoics can teach us is this: your energy is your most precious resource. Do not spend it where it earns you nothing. This is where our fourth phrase becomes your shield, your boundary, and your declaration of inner authority. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. At first glance, it sounds simple, almost too simple. But do not mistake simplicity for weakness. In fact, the strongest weapons in life are often the ones with the fewest moving parts. This phrase is one of them. It is the verbal equivalent of closing a door calmly, firmly, and without apology. Let's picture a common scenario. You're in a discussion with someone, and you can feel it veering off course. Maybe it started with good intentions, but now it has spiraled. The other person isn't listening. They're repeating themselves, raising their voice, twisting your words. You recognize what's happening. This is no longer a dialogue. It's an ego contest, and ego contests have no winners. In that moment, you could keep fighting. You could try harder to prove your point, but ask yourself, at what cost? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Continuing a fruitless argument is a misuse of that power. You may win a battle of words, but you will lose your peace. Instead, you take a breath. You keep your tone even, and you say, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." What happens then? You remove yourself from the battlefield entirely. You refuse to play the game. And in doing so, you demonstrate something extraordinary, that you value your peace more than your pride. That is a mark of true strength. The Stoics often spoke about the importance of directing our attention. Seneca reminded us that life is long, if you know how to use it. But how much of life do we waste on arguments that lead nowhere, on debates designed only to stroke egos, on words that don't illuminate, but inflame? This phrase is your reminder that not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes, the greatest victory is walking away with your integrity intact. Now, let's explore why this phrase is so effective. First, it shifts the focus from the other person to yourself. Notice the wording, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." You're not saying, "You're being ridiculous," or "You're wasting my time." Those accusations would only escalate the conflict. Instead, you're making a statement about your own choice. That choice is unassailable. Who can argue with what you prefer? It's your decision, and it requires no permission. Second, it disarms aggression. When someone is spoiling for a fight, they expect resistance. They expect you to push back. That's how they draw you into the spiral. But by calmly stepping away, you deny them that satisfaction. It's like removing your king from the chessboard. The game can no longer continue. And suddenly, they are left with nothing to fight against but their own frustration. Third, it models self-respect. Others may not admit it in the moment, but deep down, they recognize the dignity of someone who chooses peace over pettiness. They may mock, they may sneer, but the seed is planted. They've seen an example of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't flail, but simply walks away. And over time, that seed grows into respect. Let's apply this to daily life. Imagine you're on social media, scrolling through comments. Someone leaves a nasty remark, not to seek understanding, but simply to provoke. You feel the tug, the urge to respond, to clap back, to set them straight. But instead, you remember this phrase. You don't need to type it, you live it. You close the app, take a breath, and think, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. In that moment, you've protected your mind, your peace, your day. Or picture a family gathering. Emotions run high, and an old argument resurfaces, one that has circled the room 100 times before. You know exactly where it leads, nowhere but bitterness. Instead of being pulled in yet again, you calmly say, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. Then you redirect your energy to laughter, to connection, to silence if necessary. You've broken the cycle, not by force, but by choice. And here's the deeper beauty. This phrase is not just about others, it's also about you. How often do we continue conversations in our own minds that we should have ended long ago? How often do we replay old arguments, rehearse comebacks, keep reliving moments that no longer exist? Each time, we reopen the wound. But what if you said to yourself, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation? What if you closed the door in your own mind? That is the inner Stoic discipline, knowing when enough is enough. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his journal, often reminded himself not to dwell on the words or actions of others. Why? Because he understood that giving too much attention to pointless conflicts was a form of self-sabotage. It chained the mind to what was unworthy of it. Saying, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation, is a way of freeing yourself from those chains. Let's also address a common fear that using this phrase might make you seem weak. Some will think, if I end the conversation, won't they see it as me giving up? But that fear itself is rooted in ego. Strength is not proven by who can argue the longest. Strength is proven by who can stay aligned with their values. And no value is higher than peace of mind. Walking away is not surrender, it's sovereignty. Consider this: boxers, martial artists, warriors throughout history, they all know the truth. You don't fight every fight. You conserve your energy. You strike only when necessary. And you withdraw when the fight serves no purpose. The same is true of words. Every word you spend is energy. Spend it where it matters. Here's a practical exercise. This week, notice when conversations start to drain you. Notice when the dialogue shifts from seeking truth to feeding egos. When you feel that shift, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth the cost? If the answer is no, use the phrase, say calmly, without anger. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation, then walk away physically if possible, emotionally if not. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel the tug of unfinished business, the itch to respond, the pull of pride. But sit with that discomfort. Let it pass. What remains afterward is freedom. The freedom of knowing you didn't let someone else dictate your energy. And over time, you'll notice something profound. The people around you will begin to adapt. They'll realize you are not someone who can be baited into endless arguments. They'll learn to approach you with more respect, more care, because people quickly discover that those who value their peace are not easily manipulated. This is why Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." By ending toxic conversations, you refuse to become like those who thrive on them. You choose a higher ground, and that choice, repeated over and over, builds a reputation not as someone who avoids conflict, but as someone who cannot be dragged into pettiness. That reputation is priceless. So let's bring it back to the heart of the matter. Respect is not won by outshouting, outlasting, or out-arguing. Respect is won by clarity, by composure, by boundaries. And one of the clearest boundaries you can ever set is this: I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. Use it when the talk goes nowhere. Use it when the energy turns toxic. Use it not as a weapon, but as a shield. And remember, every time you choose to protect your peace, you are honoring the Stoic truth that what happens outside you matters far less than the strength you cultivate within. Say it calmly, say it firmly, and then step into the silence you've created. That silence is not empty. It is full of dignity. It is full of respect. It is full of power. Phrase 5. That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. There is a prison that many people live in without even realizing it. It has no bars, no locks, no guards, yet it keeps them confined every single day. That prison is the fear of disapproval, the constant need for others to agree with them, the subtle, suffocating belief that if someone doesn't share their view, something must be wrong with them. The Stoics knew this prison well. Seneca warned, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And in the same way, to try to agree with everyone is to stand for nothing. To live enslaved to the opinions of others is to lose your independence of thought. Which brings us to the fifth phrase, the key that unlocks the door to that invisible prison. That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. Let's break it down. This phrase does two things at once, and that's what makes it so powerful. First, it acknowledges the dignity of the other person. You're not dismissing them. You're not rolling your eyes or mocking their perspective. You're extending respect. But second, it plants your flag in the ground. You're making it clear that you have your own mind, your own judgment, and you will not surrender it just to keep the peace. It's the balance between courtesy and firmness, between kindness and conviction, between Stoic empathy and Stoic independence. Picture this: you're at a family dinner. The conversation drifts into politics or lifestyle choices, those tricky topics that so often divide people. Someone passionately insists that their way of thinking is the only reasonable way. Everyone else nods along. Then they turn to you, waiting for your agreement. You feel the pressure, the weight of expectation in the air. And instead of folding, instead of debating, you calmly say, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it." What happens next? You've defused the bomb. You've acknowledged their right to hold their belief, so you've left no opening for hostility. But at the same time, you've protected your integrity. You've drawn a line, not with aggression, but with grace. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." This phrase is the living embodiment of that wisdom. Tolerant, because you respect their opinion. Strict, because you refuse to betray your own. Now let's explore why this phrase is so essential in modern life. We live in an age of outrage. Scroll through social media, and you'll see people locked in endless battles to prove who's right. Every disagreement becomes a war. And what's the result? Division, hostility, exhaustion. But what if you stepped outside that cycle? What if, instead of debating endlessly, you chose dignity by saying, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it"? You acknowledge that disagreement is not an attack. It's simply a fact of life. And by treating it as such, you elevate the conversation above the chaos. Think of someone like Viktor Frankl, the great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. That space is exactly where this phrase lives. Instead of reacting defensively to an opinion you disagree with, you pause, you breathe. You choose a response that protects your dignity while honoring theirs. Let's look at a workplace scenario. A colleague proposes a strategy you don't agree with. They press hard, convinced they're right. Instead of butting heads in a way that creates division, you say, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it." What happens? You've asserted your independence without derailing the meeting. You've kept the relationship intact while still standing firm. And over time, people come to see you as someone who can disagree without being disagreeable, a rare and invaluable quality. Now, some might think, isn't this just a polite way of avoiding conflict? No. It's a way of transforming conflict into clarity. Conflict often arises when people feel dismissed or disrespected. This phrase removes that fuel. You're saying, "I respect you, I hear you, but my mind is my own." That's not avoidance, that's strength. Epictetus taught his students that the only thing we truly own is our ability to reason. Everything else, possessions, reputation, even health, is ultimately outside our control. But our judgments, our opinions, our perspective, that is ours. And no one can take it unless we surrender it. By saying, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it," you're exercising that ultimate freedom. You're refusing to hand over the keys to your inner citadel. Now, think of what this phrase does for you internally. How many times have you felt the urge to argue, to prove, to win? That urge is the ego's hunger. It wants validation. It wants victory. But the Stoics remind us that victory doesn't come from changing someone else's mind. It comes from maintaining your own. Every time you use this phrase, you weaken the grip of ego. You train yourself to be content with standing firm in your truth, without needing the world to echo it back. Let's ground this in a modern example. Think of Keanu Reeves. Over the years, he's become admired not just for his acting, but for his calm, humble way of navigating fame. There are countless interviews where journalists press him for controversy, try to bait him into saying something heated. And what does he do? He smiles gently, shrugs, and often says some version of, "That's your opinion, and that's okay." He doesn't fight. He doesn't bend. He simply refuses to be trapped. And in doing so, he commands more respect than any argument ever could. Here's a practice I want you to try the next time someone insists on convincing you. Resist the urge to debate point for point. Instead, listen fully, acknowledge their perspective, and then, with calm conviction, say, "That's your opinion and I respect it, but I don't share it." Then stop. Do not explain. Do not justify. Let the silence stand. At first, it will feel unfinished. Our culture trains us to argue endlessly until one side wins. But if you can sit comfortably in that silence, something remarkable happens. The other person often softens. They see that you haven't attacked them, but you also haven't surrendered. And that paradox, that mix of respect and firmness, is unforgettable. Seneca once wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." This phrase is your way of living that truth. You're saying, "My mind is free. My judgment is my own. And no amount of pressure, persuasion, or provocation will make me surrender it." Now, let's imagine the long-term effect. When you consistently use this phrase, people begin to see you differently. They realize you are not someone who can be bullied into agreement. You are not someone who clings to conflict either. You are steady. You are respectful. You are independent. And in a world desperate for validation, that independence shines like a beacon. So let's bring it all together. Respect is not about shouting. It's not about dominating. It's about presence, about calm strength, about boundaries. And this final phrase, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it," is the perfect expression of that presence. It allows you to honor others without abandoning yourself. It allows you to disagree without hostility. It allows you to live free of the invisible prison of constant approval. And that is the essence of Stoic power, the ability to live true to yourself, regardless of the noise around you. So carry this phrase with you. Use it the next time you feel the pressure to conform. Use it when someone tries to persuade you against your better judgment. Use it not to close the door on others, but to open the door to your own freedom. Because at the end of the day, the greatest respect you can command is the respect you show yourself. And when others see that, when they see that you can honor their perspective without surrendering your own, they will respect you all the more. Say it calmly. Say it firmly. And walk away knowing you've protected the one thing that matters most, your independent mind. We arrive at the end of our journey tonight. 5 phrases, simple in form, yet profound in their power. Each one is not just a collection of words, but a way of carrying yourself, a way of setting boundaries, a way of honoring both yourself and others. The Stoics would tell us that life will never stop testing us. People will provoke, situations will unsettle, voices will rise, but none of this has the power to disturb your inner citadel unless you grant it. And each time you choose calm over chaos, each time you use these phrases with clarity and poise, you are laying another stone in the fortress of your character. So tonight, as you let these thoughts settle, carry with you this quiet assurance: you need not shout to be respected. You need not fight to be heard. When your words are grounded in wisdom, spoken with dignity, they will always echo. And if this journey has stirred something in you, if it has given you even a small sense of strength, of calm, of possibility, then I invite you to share that feeling. Leave a word, a thought, an affirmation in the comments. And if you'd like to walk this path with me again, softly, simply, press subscribe channel. Now, let the day fade. Let your mind rest. And remember, you already carry the strength you seek. Good night, my friend. Sweet dreams.